Welcome to 21st Century Radio. I'm Dr. Zohara Hieronymus. Laura Kortner is our executive producer, and Anita Brockington, our engineer. Joining us this hour is a young woman I met through online activism during the recent climate strike held worldwide September 20th, 2019. Nadia Nazar played a major role as an organizer and artist, in part in the organization Climate Strike that got so much global attention. I am, as Facebook readers know, so taken with the Z generation community, those born between 1995 and 2015, that I started profiling their efforts on my own Facebook and am now doing a radio series of interviews. So first, a little more about our first guest in this series, Nadia Nazar, from one of her bios. Nadia is a 17-year-old artist and youth climate activist. She is the co-founder, co-executive director, and art director of the youth-led climate organization 0 Hour. She uses art as a tool to bring awareness to environmental issues. She has also been an activist since she was 12 years old. Nadia is a Girl Scout ambassador, and she has taken her environmental efforts to school and to the local Indian community of Baltimore. She spoke at the 2018 International Day of the Girls Summit at the United Nations headquarters about the impact of the climate crisis on girls. She also testified at the House Natural Resources hearing on climate change, urging elected officials to act on climate issues. Nadia Nazar has also participated in and led multiple climate strikes in the Washington, D.C. area. She is currently working with 0 Hour, that she helped co-found, to organize the Youth Climate Summit in Miami, Florida, an international weekend of climate action from July 12th to July 14th, 2019. In other words, this is a young woman born for the crisis of today to be part of the solution of tomorrow, of taking action locally, regionally, and internationally now. Thank you so much for joining us, Nadia.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. I am such a cheerleader of yours and other youth activists, as my listeners and Facebook readers know. But why don't we start first with you and what this process has been like, coming from your own awareness as a young girl to now being part of an entire generational movement that is local, national, and global.
Yeah, it's been really inspiring to see how big the movement has grown, especially within the youth, and kind of being one of those people that was there when there really wasn't that many other people. It was kind of hard then, but now to see like the immense amount of support there is really inspiring.
It is. I mean, as I had a guest on prior to you, Stephen Schwartz, and he and I have both been activists for 50 years. And we were saying how it's been such a long road for our elder activists like ourselves, speaking the same language you all speak, but you all speak it en masse as if you came in knowing it. How has being a leader in your generation affected you? I mean, you still go to school. You're still a young woman in a family. Talk to us a bit about the reality of the day-to-day life with all of these issues as part of your landscape.
Yeah, it's a lot busier than a lot of people presume, and a lot of it, I think, comes with sacrifices as well, you know, not being able to do, like, normal high school things and hanging out with friends and stuff, but staying in and doing work or finishing up homework, because I was doing work earlier, like traveling for different things. There are, I think, different sacrifices made, and I've seen that have made a huge amount of my friends are in the youth climate community, and it's sometimes hard because they all live so far away from me. But yeah, I think there are different choices that I've had to make, but I make them for a reason.
Well, you know, it's interesting. You all have grown up in the social media, and we all grew up with mimeograph machines. I don't know if you even know what that is. It's a very archaic thing that we had to, like, print out papers by running them through spools of ink, and then you had to hand deliver them, or you had to go to grocery stores and put them on cars. I mean, it wasn't easy to get people to show up for a protest, to testify in Congress, but you all have social media, and I am really interested in becoming better educated about its role and its value in this process. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I think social media is one of the biggest factors that have caused this movement to grow so fast, so big. People are able to get information so fast, and not only information about when a rally is, but why we're doing that rally. You know, seeking more into climate change and the effects that climate change has on people. And another thing that I think has been successful in terms of the climate movement is that we all talk about like science a lot, and I think that's something that the climate movement has done for years. But I think it was hard for the climate movement to grow at first because people wouldn't talk about the stories and how like the stories of people being impacted. You know, how are people being impacted, and that's so important to know to get that person-to-person connection. So with social media, different frontline communities can speak out about what's happening to them, and you know, show images and say it in their own words, not someone else speaking for them.
That's a beautiful insight, by the way. You know, and it's interesting because when I've talked with other elder activists like myself, and we all were sort of the highly educated Caucasian kids who came out in the 60s and early 70s understanding what was happening to the planet way back when, and Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, etc. And that's what we all have discovered, what you just said, is that we were so focused on information that we thought all you had to do was give people information and that would be enough for people to change their habits or change a corporate, a corporate agenda. But what you've said is really the heart of what we have found out by looking backwards in time, is that we didn't share enough of the stories. So you as an artist have a particular way of looking at the world and choosing ways to influence how people think and see things. So talk to us about the art process. I mean, you have to pick a logo, you have to pick a symbol, you have to pick a story. Share with us how you go through your own process of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've been an artist ever since I could pick up a pencil, and I think a lot of it is that stuff just resonates with me. And when different images and when different symbols resonate with me and with other people, I just tend to go with them. And kind of with whatever I'm feeling at the moment. There's no necessary, like, process. And there are a lot of creative youth in the movement that have been like uplifting the movement through creativity and bringing awareness. So I really, I think it's different for everybody.
So do you test them out? I mean, my husband has been a social change agent artist his whole life doing public murals, you know, including things about social justice and UFOs and environmental wellness, etc. But there aren't that many artists who use art for social change. So do you show them to other people? How do you know something will grab people's attention?
Yeah, normally I just publish things. Like I'll publish them on my social media, or I'll show them to my team, and I use my artwork in, you know, different like merchandise and like through our website and accounts and everything. So I do kind of just put it out there and see how the world responds to it, and normally it's like positive. So
well, yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, you're not that old. You've been an activist for 5 or 6 years already since you were a youth. You're the co-executive director and co-founder of this organization, 0 Hour, and the art director of the youth-led climate organization overall. So when other people want to contribute to what 0 Hour is doing, talks about the process. I mean, I do want to ask questions, but we have plenty of time to do it about your various platforms, because I read them all. I read your People's Platform and your letter to politicians, and I read your own testimony. But talk to us a little bit more about how 0 Hour works, how this social movement is working, because it doesn't do it the same way we used to.
Yeah. Well, I think everyone has different theories of change, and that's how all the climate organizations are different at the moment. You know, you see Extinction Rebellion going out there and doing civil disobedience, and you see Sunrise doing civil disobedience, but kind of lobbying at the same time and focusing more on policy. And then you see Fridays for Future, where kids are striking every Friday. So I think for us, a lot of it is that we see that we need system change, and part of that is, you know, part of that is dismantling the capitalism and racist and like the patriarchy and colonialist structures that we've embedded within our government and within corporations. And we really see that as the biggest stronghold in holding all of this up and holding the climate crisis to what it is now. So
Is
different ways that
the
we
let
go
me
about it
step
is,
back to that. So you all view the biggest challenge as the economic structure within sort of the socioeconomic fabric that our whole
well, we
country is
don't
based in.
see that, we don't see like the economic situation as the biggest thing, but we do think that, like unregulated capitalism without no checks and having corporations that get these massive powers and all of these billionaires that aren't helping or not being taxed. And there's so many things wrong with our system, and
Hmm.
people need to be held accountable, and we need to make sure that corporations stop taking over our lives,
Yeah,
putting
well,
people over profit.
yeah, I mean, absolutely. This whole notion of unchecked, ongoing for profit expansion is absurd. We know it's not sustainable, and the beautiful work out of Europe and the UK and Australia on the slow economy and local economies is so spot on that smaller local economies are more resilient and more just and will serve us well as we move through these very difficult challenges. So I noticed that, when I started to say the way in which you all work is different than what I was familiar with growing up, because we had sort of the structure based tradition. I think Saul Alinsky and others talked about this one on one relationship to develop leadership. And then there were the structure based organizations like community organizations and labor unions. And you could use a base as leverage over policymakers. But you all, it's a very different way, by contrast, this mass protest tradition of autonomous groups of individuals creating their own way of protesting, their own way of being engaged, gives us millions of options rather than just a couple thousands. That's what I think so brilliant about it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think creativity is part of that, and how people are being creative with mass mobilization and seeing how far people can take things. And I think a lot of us, like when we first started this, we saw that like the way how people were protesting previously was effective, but it wasn't effective enough, and that we wanted to do more. There's always more that you can do. So I think that our organizing is kind of something revitalizing, and it's kind of our perspective and how we see things and how we see the government.
Well, it's as I note, and as others note, you all were born with Pluto and Sagittarius, this whole Z generation group, and that is really the signature of visionary activism, serious minded, long-term goals, and a real we can do it attitude. And I just, again, Nadia, have to thank you for incarnating and thank your parents for being your parents, because this whole generation of helpers and coworkers, for those of us that are a little older, I'm 65, and I feel like, oh my God, at last we have some help. I'm fascinated. We're going to take a break, but when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about some of the other work in the world you've done. I'm fascinated by your work in Girl Up, and want to talk about your very cogent insight that climate change will impact girls in horrible ways. And not a lot of people think about that. And so I appreciate your insight. We'll be right back. If you're joining us, Nadia Nazar is our guest. You can learn more about their organization, Zero Hour, at www.thisiszerohour.org. Again, Nadia Nazar. Her name is Nadia, and her last name Nazar, Nazar. And the organization that she is co-founder, co-executive director, and art director of is called Zero Hour, and their online website is www.thisiszerohour.org.
Hi, this is Leonard Higgins, Climate Direct Action activist with ShutItDown.today and an activist in the Extinction Rebellion. You can learn more about these subjects at ShutItDown.today and xrebellion.org. You are listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Zohara Hieronymus.
Welcome back to 21st Century Radio. Remember, all our guests and their websites, etc., are archived online, and the shows are for free at 21st21st, centuryradio.com. Yeah, that was Leonard Higgins, who joined me along with Michael Foster. You all may recall they were valve turners at the tar sands pipeline and shut it down, had to go through a long and lengthy court procedure. And we also talked about the Extinction Rebellion over a year ago. If you're just joining us, Nadia Nazar is with us, and her work as the co-founder and co-executive director of Zero Hour. Their website is www.thisiszerohour.org. Now, we'll come back to This Is Zero Hour, Nadia, and also the Miami Summit and some of the things that are coming up. But I wanted to at least use a little time to talk about some of your other beautiful observations in the work you do with Girl Up at the UN, your work as a Girl Scout ambassador, and the fact that in your testimony, which I read, you've talked about climate change impacting girls in a way that people don't always think about.
Yeah, there's climate change impacts the most vulnerable because I can be affected the same way someone else is, but because I have a home, because I have access to clean water and food and resources, I'll be able to be okay. So climate change is affecting the most vulnerable first, and in a lot of situations, girls around the world are the most vulnerable in their communities because of the patriarchy, because they have been put at a disadvantage because they're constantly victim to sexual assault and sexual harassment, lack of education, child marriage, and so much more.
So, and when you think about the truth of billions of people who spend so much of a day just having to get water, and girls are kept home from school in order to serve the household or to serve, as you point out, even as young married girls at ages most wouldn't even think, possible, the climate change will fall to the most vulnerable people worldwide. But I also thought it interesting that your understanding of it goes across boundaries. It's not just about girls in India, where I know your family comes from India, and it's not just about girls in Africa, but it can be girls in our own inner cities.
Yeah, for sure. Girls are, again, at one of the most disadvantaged, and I think that's also another reason why so much of the climate movement is of girls. The majority of Zero Hour are women, and we like to say that we're women of color, we're women of color led, and so much of the climate movement, when you go and you look at it, it's very female dominated, and people always ask us, is that something that you guys have done on purpose? Like, have you purposely kept the guys out of it? And it's like, no, it's naturally come to this, and the people that have taken initiative on this issue have been primarily girls, and all the men that are in the movement are very supportive of us and very not sexist at all. So we are really glad to have them supporting us.
No, it is a really true statement, what you've just said. Not only is it multiracial, but you do see a preponderance of women. And that's a blessing because women are born with greater intuition. And we're in an age, I'm a Kabbalist, and they would say we're moving into the age of Malchut, which is the century of women. It's also the moon and intuition and all of us using our intuitions better. I read in part that your mom is a marine biologist, and I have to assume, as you said in your testimony, that going to the aquarium and feeling a closeness to nature certainly affected the way you viewed things when you began to understand how difficult a challenge we have relative to the climate. Can you talk to us a little bit about your own family growing up in terms of the values you share?
Yeah. So my mom is a marine biologist, and whenever I was sick at school, she would take me to her workplace, and I'd see all the fish and the blue crabs and all the animals. So I think there was kind of that subconscious connection. And also going to India, traveling to India every few years when we could, just being close to nature, I think has been very important, just something I've always valued. And now I've been really connecting it to people and how the connection between people and nature is, and how important and valuable that relationship is. And that we're completely overlooking it.
Yeah, well, now there's like 450 schools, I think, in this country that are outdoor education schools, and the State of the World report did a beautiful version of one of their books on just that, of readjusting all of education worldwide to be raising children as scientists and engineers and technologically sort of brilliant. And I've been actually collecting all these young inventors on my Facebook. I know you all don't use Facebook a lot, but I do. I'm actually a newbie, Nadia. I just got on Facebook this August for the first time, and I started asking all these older people on Facebook, so where do the youth, have their group conversation? And they said, I have to go to Twitter. Is that what I have to do?
Twitter and Instagram, yeah.
Twitter and Instagram. I hope I can handle it, but I just might do it because I really want to be part of that conversation in that forum. All right, so let's look at a number of things. This September 20th, 2019 show and the media coverage was really fantastic, and it's definitely a beginning. You all have changed the conversation in general, but for yourselves, there has to have been a true sense. I mean, I wept that day with joy. There has to be a feeling in your hearts that the conversation has shifted. How has it shifted for you all?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think it's kind of been the same, because we all know what we want, and our organizations have slightly different goals. So I think we all kind of still know what we want, and we all are now having conversations about how are we going to mobilize for the election next year, and what are we doing moving forward. But we definitely are thinking about like long-term goals and what we can really do to really push the movement this next year.
Yeah, well, I was reading your platform based on that lawsuit, the climate lawsuit that is still in the courts on the west side of the country. Is it Alaska? Yeah, in Alaska. And talk to us a bit about the platform that you all have used.
The platform for the lawsuit?
Yeah. Well,
yes,
based on it, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a part of the lawsuit, but so I'm not really able to speak on that.
Okay, but I noticed that you had used, I think I'm looking for my note on it. It was a very particular thing that you said about I know it was. It was the platform for the 0 Hour team. You reviewed the requirements in the children's climate lawsuit against the federal government. And your platform also specifies the need for climate justice, including equity, quote, racial justice and economic justice, and protecting treaty rights. I mean, these are all really significant realities that somehow or other you have managed to synthesize into an understanding that is not only shared among your cohorts, but is the platform that 0 Hour works with in going to the federal government. I read that's one of your focuses is the federal government. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And so share with us some of the very particulars that you're looking at, and then we'll talk a little bit about the upcoming Miami program.
Yeah, so we do look for climate justice, and a lot of what is in our platform is now embodied in the Green New Deal, talking about treaty rights for Indigenous people and climate justice, and that we need justice for immigrants and justice for low-income and communities of color and gentrification. And there's just so many issues that need to be touched upon, and really climate justice is the culmination of all the issues that we're facing in the world right now, like healthcare and so much more.
Well, as we used to say it, the darker the skin, the dirtier the air, and the more lethal the dumps. And it was just a clear observation that we all made and fought for decades. So, the thing that I feel so relieved about is that the things we had to hold out as individual issues, you all have synthesized as a foundational reality. And I think that that's just fantastic. The other thing you all look at is construction and new buildings and new appliances and investing in mass transit. I mean, there's not an area that you speak to that isn't spoken to, but there's some way to try to realize them together. So talk to us a little bit about the upcoming Miami summit and what you plan to do over the summer in July.
Yeah, the Miami summit actually happened this past July. So it already happened.
Oh,
This
I
past July in
misread
Miami.
that. Oh, sorry about that. I thought there
Yeah.
was something new coming up.
No.
All right, so tell
Yeah.
us about it.
Yeah. It was really nice. We trained about over 350 youth and adults and more on climate justice, and we had different trainings from artful activism to like a panel with these amazing Indigenous women. So we really were able to give resources and education and insight to the attendees and also stand strong with the Miami community.
Mm-hmm. And when you travel, I mean, you travel a lot, and as I read, you're co-founder of Zero Hour, you met online, is that right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of you meet each other without even necessarily physically coming into contact with each other, but communicate your same values. Do you find that there's a difference from city to city based in where the population is or what the system and the economy of the city is like?
No, I don't think that's ever been significant in what I've seen. But I do see, I do notice that a lot of um, our organizers are based outside of like a city. Like one of the other co-founders is nearby to New York, while the other one is nearby to Seattle. We have another organizer nearby to DC. So like, I guess that's an observation that
Mm-hmm.
and I'm located near Baltimore.
So you're
Yeah.
near cities, but not necessarily urban dwellers. Do you notice any sort of trend in terms of, like you, I grew up in nature and I love nature, and it has always been the center about which my entire life has revolved. And I guess that's why I also started as an activist in 68 or so, 69. I was 14, handing out flyers on acid rain for Ralph Nader. So, some of us like you got the bite early of really wanting to make a difference in the world. But I found there were so many issues, like you all are finding there are so many issues that I had to sort of pick a niche, which I did environmental impacts on health, and that was how I focused. Do you find you have a particular area that calls you more than others?
In the climate movement?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many because the climate movement encapsulates socioeconomic realities, it
Yeah.
encapsulates global trading, there's so many pieces of it.
Yeah, I mean, I try to really focus on the overall thing and communicating to people how large this issue is,
Mm-hmm.
and just in general talking about the impact that it has on my generation and how it impacts people differently.
Do you find I had another gentleman on named Stefan Schwartz, and I encourage you to read some of his work at Schwartz Report. But we were talking about the mental health of the world with focusing on the reality that we have to face, and we're not doing a very good job of facing how many millions of people will be climate migrants, and we're not really preparing in advance for that kind of mass location of millions of people. And so we had a discussion about, very briefly, about the mental health of people. And I know people my age, in their 60s and 70s, have a lot of anxiety about climate change. You all are a lot younger. You're in your adolescence, and people even younger than you, go home from school crying about things. I've talked to mothers of children who are in first and second grade. What do you do about that? How do you personally handle the stress of this reality?
Yeah, so I would say the average person in my generation that knows about climate change has climate anxiety. Even people who don't take action really are understanding the impacts and are really seeing it and are worried. And I think a lot of people's ways of coping with it is taking action.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's my way of coping with it because, when I look back, I don't want to be one of those people that thinks that I didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it was happening, and I didn't try my best to stop it. So I think that's how a lot of us are coping by fighting for it and knowing that we're at least trying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can be right in your group. I'm a little older, but maybe I can come and you won't notice that I have white hair. I feel the same way, and my husband too. That's why we've both been such devoted activists our entire lives, because if you see something and don't do something, I don't know how you live with yourself. I'm the same kind of soul. So we need what I've always said is a life economy. I wanted to throw something at you, but I'll wait till the next when we come back from a break, because I have an idea that I've passed around and it's gotten to the UN, but I think you all can carry it further. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the other things you do with Zero Hour. If you're just joining us, Nadia Nazar is with us. She is the co-founder and co-executive director and art director of Zero Hour. They are a fantastic organization. They do a great deal focused on the federal government. It's a youth-led organization. Go to www.thisiszerohour.org, www.thisiszerohour.org.
Hello, this is Eric Pica, President of Friends of the Earth United States, and you are listening to the 21st Century Radio with Dr. Sahara Hieronymus. Friends of the Earth is an organization that champions a healthy and just world, and you can learn more about us at www.foe.org.
Indeed, check out foe.org. You know, when you think about all the people and organizations that we've interviewed on 21st Century Radio over 36 years, it's really been a wonderful blessing to be able to give voice to all of those trying to create a more just and sustainable future, like our guest now of a new generation. Nadia Nazar is with us, and she is the co-founder and co-executive director and art director of Zero Hour. Their website is www.thisiszerohour.org. I love the name. Talk to us about the various names. I mean, as an artist myself, the process isn't always discussed publicly of how names are come up with for nonprofits or how the art is selected. Talk to us a bit about the name, Nadia.
Yeah, so we decided Zero Hour because we like saying this is Zero Hour, and we want to kind of emphasize that we feel like there's like a ticking time bomb on our heads, that we only have a certain amount of time, and we're at Zero Hour because we don't have that much time left, but we do have enough time to solve this crisis.
Amen to that. I mean, there definitely is not a lack of I guess the right word is intelligence. And I've been noting all of the inventions that younger people are making, whether it's an 8-year-old who created an amazing solar heater that goes up on a roof, or a young 12-year-old who created a way to get the plastics out of the ocean. I mean, I think that's one of the beautiful things about looking at your whole generation of souls who've incarnated, knowing I believe this anyway, that we choose to incarnate and that you've chosen to incarnate to do such big work. So when you then look down line and you're working, Zero Hour focuses on the federal government, talk to us about when you select the issues and then you select the action.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe we don't select any specific issue. Our issue is climate change, and we understand that it encompasses other issues, and we include that in our action. With making action, I think we really think about our theory of change and how are we going to get change done, and thinking logistically about, like, what's happening in the future. And right now we're thinking a lot about the election for next year and how that's really important, because either we could get, a candidate, not a candidate, but a president that will take massive radical action in the next 4 years, or a president that won't. So, yeah, we're really focusing.
Yeah, could continue to roll back all the gains we've made at lightning speed. It's just extraordinary to those of us who have, been part of the Clean Water Act and all the other important things, protecting the wildlife and endangered species, that we have an administration that literally is going down the checklist of every important protection we have, whether it's over mining rights or Arctic drilling, and thank God for the courts. I mean, the courts have made such a profound difference. Well, are there any areas that you see, I mean, this is a big question, but I ask it of all my guests, so I'm going to ask you the same question. Are there any leverage points? You know what I mean by that? Like something that if we could get the cornerstone in place, a lot of other things might roll from it?
What do you mean by that?
Well, for instance, we know that social justice is part of the issue with climate justice. We know that climate change is also part of corporations believing that you can have extraordinary perpetual growth rather than ever believing in management of what we have rather than continual expansion. We used to think that sustainable agriculture, I personally fought so hard for permaculture and sustainable ag and organic farming because I always thought of the land as being the cornerstone. And if we could have healthy food and healthy agricultural systems, that we could roll out everything from that. But that hasn't gotten the kind of traction, not in this country as it has in Europe. So I would have called that a leverage point. Like that could have made people better appreciate the environmental impacts on our health, whether it's plastics or poor air or bad water. That's what I mean.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would say the land is the leverage point, and how we live off the land and how we use it, and learning not to exploit the land and exploit the animals of local areas, and just learning how to live cohesively with the land and living locally rather than globally.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be one of the most important parts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I think too. I don't know if it's until there's so many issues. I feel like I just want to sigh half the time. But so I have this idea I want to pass on to you because you're an artist and you're brilliant and you all move like lightning speed. So after covering all the horrors of the world for many decades, about 20 years ago, I had this observation that the way to summarize the way we were living in the world was that we have a death economy. We make war on each other. We make war on land, war on the animals, war on each other, war on space, etc., that we need a life economy. So we had a death economy currently, but we need a life economy, and that a life economy would do sustainable farming, social justice, all the good. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine, John Perkins, took this to the G7 when I said to him, this is just great, you should try to, and he did. And I'm hoping you might find it of interest to use that somehow in your summaries and in your art, that what we need is a life economy. Because when I've said it to people of all political persuasion, even people I really don't agree with, they kind of got it. Like, we don't have a health program. We have an illness for profit business in this country. We don't prevent sickness. We pay a lot of money for illness, that kind of thing. What do you think about that? A life economy versus a death economy. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, that sounds really interesting.
Well, good. I want you to take that out there. We'll trade. I give you a little airtime and you take life economy and death economy out to your generation. How's that for a trade?
Yeah.
All right. So now you are in high school, right? Are you a junior or a senior?
I'm a senior.
You're a senior. So what are your plans after high school?
I'm planning to go to college and continue organizing.
And do you already have like certain areas you want to become, a student of, certain areas you want to specialize in?
I'm applying, but I don't know yet.
Well, you're so broad-minded. Talk to us a bit about the work you've done at the UN.
Yeah, I spoke at the UN last year for the International Day of the Girl Summit, and this year I recently attended the UN Youth Climate Summit in New York on September 20th.
Right.
Yeah.
And what went on?
It was kind of like a training. They gave us trainings on different things. It wasn't necessarily what we were all expecting.
Uh-huh. And so as a senior, then you'll be old enough to vote.
Yeah, I will be old enough to vote.
Well, that's really exciting. So I read that you all plan to register at least 1 million students to vote. How many are there really?
I think there are a few million people, really young people that are eligible to vote next year.
And for those in my listening audience who are older and who may have children your age or grandchildren your age, what do you think it's important to tell them about the work you all are doing and how we can work together?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that there's always more that can be done. And there are definitely things you can do, like voting, but and recycling. But there's so much more that needs to be done in terms of holding corporations accountable and holding the government accountable. So really see how you can help your local community and help take climate action, how you can uplift other youth and include them in your work.
Mm-hmm. So can we switch gears a little bit to your artistic talents and your work as an artist? What are your favorite mediums?
Yeah, I do a lot of different mediums, mainly acrylic paint, just paint in general for like different banners and different things like that, but also like digital media, animating, film, and animating film, photography in some sense, and I work with many different mediums.
Oh, how wonderful. A multimedia artist. That's fantastic. Well, my husband
Yeah.
has always tried to encourage other artists because if you look at world history, the artists have made such profound differences, whether they're authors or painters or sculptors or musicians, when they
Yeah.
choose to. I mean, in the 60s, the rock and roll industry had so much to do with the protest movement against the war in Vietnam and the covert war in Laos. And
Yeah.
what do you think has brings you all together? I mean, are there certain music groups that you feel are doing an adequate job of actually getting the message out there, or is the music industry no longer capable of this kind of change?
I think it's kind of like the unification of media. We all kind of grew up watching Harry Potter and watching the Hunger Games and watching all these dystopian societies where, there's like there's like something terrible happening, and the young people are the ones that step up. And I think just watching all those movies, and I think that we're really kind of the first generation to be raised on like Pixar animation studios, and like I think that new vivid storytelling has been helpful in inspiring youth, and I definitely know that that's something that inspires me. And because like we all watched it,
Yeah,
whether you live in a different state, whether you have different values, we all watched it and
that's
took away
fascinating. That
the
is
same core
fascinating.
values from it. Yeah.
So that's really interesting. So all these dystopian images that you grew up with kind of really got into the conscious and unconscious, and you all realize that even though it may be invention, it's a portrait of potential reality.
Yeah.
That's fascinating because I was commenting the other day that I'm of the generation, the last generation that grew up without cell phones. And we grew up passing notes to each other. That was the big way to communicate in secret, was to pass a note. And so we have this sort of broad expanse into technology that we've moved in. So now, if you don't mind, you mind a little quick education for my sake on Twitter and Instagram. And I interviewed a fascinating guy named Rob Kahl who said that in order to trend in Twitter, you have to post 100 hashtag somethings a day. And I said to him, well, I certainly don't have that time. He said, nor do companies, and they have computers who do that for them. How do you all use hashtags in general and the whole way in which information is in group chat through Instagram and other apps?
Yeah, I mean, when we ask people to share our posts and to uplift our posts, we ask them to tag us and use our hashtag. So I think that's really how we got around. I think another thing is like creating a commotion. We see whenever we've trended, it's because we've had like events going on. When we had our first Youth Climate March, we were trending on Twitter. And I think really creating a commotion, and people need to be talking about you in order to trend.
It's so interesting. I mean, you all also have grown up as groups. I remember my own daughter, who's now in her 30s, that she grew up in a time period where they all went out as groups, and they were more comfortable a little later than her. I remember the studies of kids saying they were more comfortable talking online through their phones than actually being in person with somebody face to face. But that doesn't work if you want to do social movement, does it?
I mean, it can in different ways. A lot of youth organizations work now online because we're all located in different parts of the country, so I think it's really easy for us to kind of oversee human connection when we're just working. But at the same time, when we meet in person, that's, I think, when a lot of like the real love comes out. And, people really make really good friends in the movement.
You know, I find the same thing. Most of my work has been at a distance. I've interviewed thousands and thousands of people, and I feel so close to them, but 99% I've never met in person. So I've kind of, through radio, had a little experience of what you all have grown up experiencing, sort of this at-a-distance connectivity, because we all really are one mind. So in closing, what would you like to share with us about 0 Hour?
Yeah, I'd like to share that we're going to continue mobilizing, especially for the election, among other things, in the next few months, and to really just consider how you can uplift youth. A huge way for adults to uplift youth is to donate to youth-led organizations like 0 Hour. And if you want to do that, you can go to our website. This is zerohour.org, and you can find the donate button there. But
thank you so much, Nadia, for the work that you do, and I look forward to continuing this conversation over the coming years. God bless you.
Stimulating talk and breaking news on Talk Radio 680 WCBM, Baltimore, and WCBM.com.